constant barrage of social media and adverts popping on your phone, maybe even peer influence, pushing you towards reckless spending. Realizing the value of your time and your resources is a crucial step in achieving financial security and the freedom that that can bring. Imagine if you never had to work another day in your life just to pay the bills. What if you could create even greater financial security in your life and the ability to choose to do what you love? If you're yearning for more financial security and the time to pursue your passions, you need to subscribe to A Wealthy Life. My name's Vicky Boucher and I'm the host. And the aim of this show is to help you pinpoint your values and create a plan to live a truly wealthy life, doing what you love with those that matter to you most. What if you could take more control and create the life you really wanted to live? Do subscribe now. Hello and welcome. My name is Vicky Boucher and welcome to A Wealthy Life. And today I am joined by a wonderful friend of mine, Jay Rooney, who is all things financial. So we first met when he was a mortgage broker and he's been my mortgage broker. And now he's wandered into being able to be an expert on the pension side of things. And I'm going to draw on his pension knowledge in a later podcast. So you'll make sure you subscribe and then you'll be able to catch up on that podcast. But what I really wanted to do is put Jay on the hot coals and really find out about his investment journey, because this isn't just any man. This is a man who lives in the financial world, who understands mortgages and investments and pensions. And if he's investing in property, I thought he'd be a good one for us to grill him on your behalf. So Jay, having warned you what I'm going to do to you, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vicky.
I'll be nice, obviously. You know I'll be nice.
No doubt. You're always nice.
Thank you. I'll send you the check later. So let's just start a bit chronologically and then see where we go. So you've got a property portfolio.
I do, yes.
When did you start? What have you got? What did you do? Give us a bit of a background.
So when I was 20 years old, which was 23 years ago.
Oh my God, you're so old.
I was looking for my first property in Belfast. I was a young fledgling financial advisor, specializing in pensions and investments and working for the Prudential. And I found a property that I wanted to purchase. I asked an agent for the information. They sent me through the information on the wrong property in the building. It was an apartment in a building right in the heart of Belfast. And when I called them about it, I noted they were offering this apartment for £74,950 because it was the last flat of a block that had been built 2 years prior. And the one I was expecting information on was a much smaller flat in the same block for £85,000. So I jumped on that and they said, "Oh, we've sent you the wrong information, but since you've got it, are you interested?" And I said, "Yes, I'm interested." They said, "Well, if you come round to the office right now and put £1,000 down, we'll consider it yours." So I did that. Even though I didn't have a mortgage in place, I knew nothing about mortgages. Going back to when I was 20, it was all pensions for me. I did that and I bought that. And I'm not going to diverge too much, but I will say this. The agent put me in touch with an IFA based on the Stranmillis Road in Belfast, lovely man called Graham. And if it wasn't for Graham and his insight with the First Trust Bank and the relationship he had with the First Trust Bank in Belfast and an assistant manager at a branch, I wouldn't have got the mortgage I needed for that £75,000 apartment. But I bought it. And then 4 months later, I left the Prudential and went to work as an IFA for a private advisory firm in Belfast, not the same one that Graham worked for. And that particular firm, although they did pensions and investments, most of their work was mortgage work. So I had to be trained up in the mortgage side of things, even though my primary job was pensions and investments. And it was noted to me that I had a lot of equity in the property because I'd bought a property worth about £100,000 to £110,000 for 75. So they introduced me to the concept of being able to release equity out of a property in order to purchase another one. So lo and behold, I did that. So I managed to release out about £22,000-23,000, and I reinvested that into another property. And that's whenever my property journey began. And then I managed to pick up another couple over the next few years, because back then, remember, we thankfully only needed a 15% deposit whenever we were purchasing property. The marketplace was conditioned to placing down things like a 15% deposit for an 85% mortgage.
Yeah.
Very different today. The market is conditioned for a 75% loan to value mortgage. And that, maybe that's a good thing. But back then it was a little easier, no doubt about it. So I managed to do that. And then when I moved over to Manchester in 2004, late 2004, and I started my own business in November 2005, that business was one solely focused on mortgages and insurance, simply because as a fledgling business, I couldn't get permissions for investments and pensions at the time. And thankfully, that business did very well. And over the course of another 2 or 3 years, I picked up several properties. I think I added another 6 or 7 to my portfolio, where I managed to get up to, I think I got up to about 18 at one point. And I have reduced down some, not necessarily because I wanted to, but because from a taxation point of view, because of all the new rules that came out, which no doubt we all talked about and we've seen on your podcast, where we can no longer claim directly the mortgage interest. It didn't make sense for me to hold on to a number of properties. So instead, what it made sense for me to do was to exit the market with those particular properties and reduce my property portfolio down in my personal name and start to purchase properties through a special purpose vehicle limited company, which I have been doing now for about 6 years. And that's it. I just say, it was just, was it luck? Absolutely. Did I seize the opportunity because somebody educated me to by way of one of my new colleagues when I went to work in the practice that focused on mortgages? Again, absolutely. And as and when opportunity came up and I saw a property that just looked like good value for money, I went and bought it, because when I was young and my business was taking off and I was 24, 25, 26, I thought if I don't spend this on a property, I'm going to spend it on something really stupid. So I figured if I put the money into a property, I couldn't then go and spend it on something even, that I shouldn't be doing as a young man in his mid-20s.
I mean, it sounds a remarkable journey, very similar to the journey I had, although I started probably at the age you are now rather than, so we've both had this 20-year journey, but I'm older than you. And I would say, if you can start that journey when you're in your 20s or your 30s, it just sets you up, doesn't it? I mean, yes, you've had the hiccup in the middle, as we all have, with thanks to Chancellor George Osborne, I'm not going to spit when I say his name, and Section 24 mucking about in the market as usual. And what they've done is forced everybody into limited companies, as you said. So, except for those bumps, but you get bumps in every business, whether it's bringing in the congestion charge if you're a taxi driver, or increasing beer tax if you're a craft beer maker. There's always going to be someone interfering, and they've interfered plenty in the financial markets too.
They have.
You just ride it.
As you say, there's always going to be challenge. There's always going to be obstacles. Strangely, what I find is with obstacles, which is in the face of adversity, comes opportunity for people. If they're fortunate enough to spot it, and even more fortunate to find it, because theory is great in the property market, but we all know it's all about finding the right properties. And I have said to many of our clients, and I can speak as a fellow landlord. So whenever I speak to our clients, I say, I'm not just speaking to you as a financial advisor. Remember, I'm a landlord too. We're all in this together. And the reality is that unfortunately, a lot of changes in direction of regulation has battered the private landlord market rather into submission, particularly since 2016. We had was it a triple whammy? We had the stamp duty going through the roof. We had, you're not going to be able to claim all your mortgage interest anymore. And there was a third one. I can't remember what it was at the time, but it was another obstacle that people were faced with. And we went from a situation where special purpose vehicle limited company mortgages went from being incredibly niche to transcending over a 2-year period to becoming mainstream.
Yeah.
And now the limited company buy-to-let sector is much bigger and much more popular than the personal individual buy-to-let sector, which really just exists today as a hangover legacy of people looking to remortgage old property, to be honest with you. But when we look at all of those challenges, in addition to all of the council challenges, so Salford City Council, who I admire and respect and find to be very, very friendly, decided that a 3-bedroom property of mine one day would have to have a HMO license, even though it only had 3 bedrooms, because 3 friends were sharing it. So it's things like that, and it adds cost, and it adds a great deal of challenge. And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of our clients exit the marketplace. But I will say this: our clients that have remained in the market have really capitalized on the opportunities. And one of those opportunities we see, I understand, not so much in the Southeast from what I hear anecdotally. And forgive me, I don't have any properties in Greater London. I do in different parts of the country, but not in Greater London. No matter where I look in the marketplace, even in Scotland, where rents are historically low, and Northern Ireland, where I had a couple of properties, we have seen rents increase a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean over the past 10 years, over the past 6 years. We've seen rents increase a lot since COVID, of course.
Yeah.
I'll not get into anecdotes, but I've seen some remarkable increases. I've seen 25 to 30% increases in a case of 18 to 24 months, which now the latest round of challenge is the much increased borrowing costs that landlords have been experiencing since maybe they last fixed their mortgages 2 or 3 or 5 years ago. They have seen their rates go up significantly. Thankfully, they've also seen their rents go up significantly. So for those that remain in the market, there continues to be a lot of opportunity there, no doubt about it. But I personally feel, it's just a rule of thumb, it should always be worked out properly by a tax advisor, financial advisor, or chartered accountant. When somebody comes to us and says, I want to start investing in property, should I invest in my personal name or should I invest in limited company name? We need to understand a lot about the person. We need to understand, first of all, how long are you going to keep these properties for? Are you looking succession? Are you looking to bequeath them to the next generation, or will you be flipping them over a short period of time? Secondly, what else do you do for a living? What else does your income look like? Things like that. But as a rule of thumb, most people that want to get into property investment these days that come to speak to us aren't really looking to buy one for a year or two. They're looking to buy a number for a period of time. And I tend to find that crossover point for most people is about 3 properties. So if somebody's looking to buy 1 or 2 properties and they don't have that accountant support because they're not a limited company, they don't run their own business already, and the notion of having to deal with directors' responsibilities gives them a nosebleed. Actually, if you're only buying a couple of properties, go ahead and just buy them in your personal name, particularly if you're not huge earners. You know, if the couple, very often they're a couple, are basic rate taxpayers. But once you get to 3+, and your ambition is to go to 3+, it does tend to make sense to go down the limited company. Not always, depends on the individual circumstances, but that's just what I find as a rule of thumb. Yeah.
I would agree with you.
If we knew then, Vicky, what we knew today, I would have bought them all in limited company names. I would have went to Mortgage Express and paid the higher rates and paid the independent legal advice that we used to have to do back in 2006 and 7 when I was buying them all in my personal name. But I guess we always just thought, you know, from a I will use the word, from a fair and from a logical point of view.
Yes.
If a property is turning over £10,000 a year and one of those expenses is mortgage interest, then just like any business, I should be able to claim that as an expense. And somehow we woke up on one day that wasn't okay anymore.
I know, I know. It is. There could be a whole podcast on the irrationality of it, not just on the fact it doesn't make sense when you compare businesses to businesses. Also, the fact that as a landlord, we have to give independent guarantee so that we guarantee our own mortgages, which most businesses don't make their directors do. And then on top of it, we're checking the migrant and right to rent status. So we become part of the Home Office, and then we have to check for this and that. So some of the checks are sensible. Some of the taxes are sensible. Some of it doesn't make sense. But what I really liked out of that conversation, although thank you very much for sharing the journey, is this idea that out of adversity comes opportunities, and then you've either got to be ready to seize them, or you first spot them and then seize them. But it's really interesting. I look at this and it feels like almost like there is a version of Mother Nature in the property market. When the property market gets too excited, too hot, something comes along. And if something doesn't come along in the form of an interest rate or anything else, then the government will be interfering somewhere in there, because they'll have spotted some sort of tax opportunity or whatever else. And so something will come in to change the marketplace when it gets too excited. And that puts a whole load of people off. And I don't think that that's a bad idea, because when too many people are in the market, then yes, you can be in a situation where maybe it's harder for the residential buyer. I can remember, and I can't remember when this was, but I know that we were looking in Langley, and we must have been looking in Langley because my children were living in there. So it's got to be, maybe 4 years before COVID, something like that. So, 8-ish or something years ago. And there were queues of people outside these houses. So the houses were on the market and people were just queuing up outside the properties so that they got 5 minutes to walk in and walk round. And you literally went like you were a caterpillar. You would go in and you would follow the person in front of you, and you'd walk round and turn around and come back out again. And outside was an estate agent doing an open day, going, right, are you going to put an offer in? And literally taking the offers as they walked out the door. And that's madness.
I agree.
That's what sets the property prices out the roof.
Vicky, we saw this in 2022 as well. Certainly in the area where I live, and great. Well, I live in South Manchester. I live in a little village called Bramhall, near Stockport, and we didn't just see it for residential buyers wanting to buy 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 pound houses, which back in 2022, before things heated up, would have bought you a good sized house in my area. We also saw it where clients were going to East Manchester. Areas that were traditionally relatively low income areas, and properties that in 2019, 2020 you could purchase for 110, 115,000. People were now gladly paying 135 to 150,000.
Yes.
Although, to be fair, the rents went up as well. The rents went up from about 525, 550 to 750, and today I'm hearing 850. Yep. But the picture you've just described, I saw with my own two eyes, where people were literally getting 5 or 10 minutes to look around the property and away they go. I had one particular client who, over a 6-month period, managed to purchase 2 properties. He offered on 60.
Wow.
And of the 2 he purchased, he wasn't the winning bidder. He was the person the estate agent ended up going back to, because they said, we've been let down. Are you in a position to buy cash? The particular client said, I am in a position to buy cash. And I want to be clear, if we reach a point where my mortgage is holding the process up, I am prepared to write the check, but it is my full intention to put a 75% mortgage on that property. But if the solicitors are all ready to roll, and my mortgage hasn't arrived at my solicitor's office, I'll write a check if I have to, yeah. And that was the only thing that got him those 2 out of 60 properties in and around Greater Manchester. He became very frustrated by the marketplace.
I had a client down in Oxford, and she had the cash to buy a property completely outright, and she couldn't get anywhere. She wasn't just, normally you show up as a cash buyer, and that carries some weight, that takes you up a level. But you're right, post-COVID, everything changed. And I had exactly the same thing in Liverpool, where houses that I managed to buy in 2021, just as the market opened, for around the 100,000, within 12 months, they were up there at 135, 40. Now, the clients were nicely into 3 and 5 year deals, so they weren't going to sell them, and they were in there for the long term. But it's nice to know they'd got that equity stuck in.
I think what's interesting is I look at 2 points with regards to that. I take a great deal of comfort that from the peak of the property market, which I would classify as August 2022, to now, we haven't seen the big depression on prices that we were concerned about. I'm more than happy when I'm wrong about these things, when I'm fearing the worst. But I remember in September 22, when the market was a very different place and the base rate wasn't nearly as high, I had this conversation with colleagues. We have a weekly meeting, and we get the old crystal balls out. And I said, right, guys, snap poll, where price is going to be in June 2023. And some colleagues said, they're going to keep going up. Some colleagues said, they're going to be about the same. A couple of colleagues said, well, it kind of depends, which means they didn't know. And I said, you need to allow for 10%. I said, I really hope I'm wrong, but you need to allow for 10%.
Well,
really
up or down?
Down. Reduction.
Oh, right.
Yeah, reduction. Yeah. Reduction, yeah. I was very concerned about the markets, not just the property markets. Obviously, in my primary role, I'm managing people's pensions and investment portfolios. And we were very, very concerned about the headwinds in 2022. 2022 globally was the third most volatile year for asset prices since 1953. And property is an asset. You know, this is one of them. So remarkably robust. The property market, considering all the headwinds. I mean, because it wasn't just one or two; it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And 2023, you know, let's not pretend that was plain sailing. It wasn't. But it was okay. It was all right. It was all right. The property prices have stabilized. So I take a great deal of solace from that. But I also look at the other side of the equation from what you just mentioned, trying to buy in Liverpool. I have a client who, when they started selling in 2021 in Liverpool, had about 60, 65 houses in and around Merseyside. So pretty big landlord. And they got rid of about 15 of them. And they just paused about a year ago, beginning of 23, maybe late quarter one, 23. They just paused because they went from getting a premium on their property to suddenly not getting asking price. They were having to take bids. And as you just said, because they didn't have to sell, they just saw an opportune window to sell some properties. They didn't have to sell. They just said, okay, that particular overheated moment is over.
Is over. Stop.
So we'll just go back to making lots of money on rent. And when the next boom comes along, we'll get rid of a few then.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt about it. But that client doesn't have to sell those properties. There are plenty of people out there that absolutely need to sell their properties. I could tell you about clients who have unfortunately come to us to say, I'm receiving $750 a month rent. My mortgage is now about to go to $600 a month. It now makes no sense for me to hold on to this property. What would you suggest? To which we say, well, there are theoretically two options. You try and get a higher rental yield, or you choose to exit the property. If you can't get a higher exit yield, then actually it makes sense to sell. Yeah. And therein lies the opportunity for the buyer. Machiavellian as that sounds. I hate to say that, but when there's a winner, there has to be a loser. That's how capitalism works, you know. Yeah. And I've been on both sides of that equation. I want to be clear. I've taken a haircut on a number of properties in the past, and I like to think I've learned through my mistakes. But I'm one of those people that I have to hit the wall before I know to stop running into it. So hopefully I made most of the mistakes in my 20s. But yeah, so there's no doubt about it. There is opportunity. There's definitely opportunity because there are people out there that do need to exit the investment marketplace because they've become despondent about it.
Yeah,
you know, they're done with all
so.
The regulations. They're done with them having to tick all those boxes. They don't want to be they don't want to be a member of the National Residential Landlords Association, or their letting agent has their heart broke, because I've experienced that as a landlord. Some letting agents are absolutely fantastic, and you can lift the phone to them and have that conversation like they're your accountant or professional advisor or financial advisor. Some letting agents, you never know who's going to answer the phone, and the person you just started to build up a relationship, they've left last week again.
Yeah.
So
another 20-year-old is in who doesn't know the business.
20-year-old who's perfectly lovely. Who's perfectly lovely, and has yet
perfectly
to learn,
naive.
Has yet to ply their trade, shall we say?
Yes.
Yes. So I understand why people are leaving the marketplace, but that does leave an opportunity for those of us remaining in it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that maybe this would come out of it, that, you know, both of us are, let's class ourselves as serious investors, as in we've gone into it. Both of us maybe naively up the front. I mean, I didn't have any clue. Didn't have a clue what I was doing to start with. But then you learn on the job, and then I did take education in the pure property sense, and you took your education through your business route, really, by learning about the mortgages and stuff, and then bringing that together and building that portfolio that puts you in a much stronger position now than if you didn't have the properties. But along the way, you've ridden these challenges, and in each challenge, would you say that, if I call it your strategy, your overall investment strategy has crystallized a bit more? So every time something happens, you go, or I'm going to look at the numbers a bit harder on that, or I'm only going to buy this type of property at that type of price, or this type of tenant. You like, it's not shrinking really, but it's becoming more focused.
That dawned on me many years ago, probably around 2009, just after the sky had fallen. And an opportunity came along for me and some time. I call it the sky falling, the banking collapse.
Yeah.
So that was one of the worst year for
that would have been when we met, because that's when I started investing, is 2009,
around 2009, 2010. And an opportunity came across my table where somebody wanted to get rid of some properties in Scotland. And I'd never invested in Scotland. I had some clients that had invested in Scotland. We only have a small number of clients in Scotland, I should point out. The majority of our clients are based in England and Northern Ireland. I'm not even sure we have anyone in Wales. I think we do. We have a few people in Wales. I'm lying. We have a few people in Wales. And we had to learn on the job there because it's a different legal system. One could argue it's a better legal system.
Yes.
Yeah. And I looked at it, and I was sat with a colleague, Michael, who was crunching the numbers with me. And we said to each other, do we want to be investing in Paisley in Scotland? I mean, I know where it is, but I've never been there. I've been to Glasgow, but I've never been to Paisley. And we thought, you know what? If the numbers work, then the numbers work. And that's it. And it's just something I've always run with personally, which is why whenever people say to me, oh, why did you buy that property in Plymouth? Well, actually, it was a great deal. It came up. It was cracking. And whilst I've never been to Plymouth, the numbers worked. And then I've had lovely properties offered to me by clients, and I've looked at them. There was one in Didsbury. Now, you may or may not have heard of Didsbury. It's probably it's the most affluent M postcode, Manchester postcode, M20. Gorgeous property, 3-bedroom duplex in a lovely old building. There's only 6 flats in this building. We're not talking a block of 100 flats.
Yes.
Okay? It's all self-managed by the owners, and it's fantastic. The client of mine decided it's worth 400,000 all day long. They've been burnt by a couple of people. They were absolutely willing, just to get rid of it, to take as little as 300 to 320,000 pounds. Well, 2 things. I didn't want to take advantage of them, so I didn't do it myself. I did put them in touch with a couple of agents, and I made it clear to the agent not to take advantage of the client. But one agent came back to me and said, Jay, why don't you just buy this for like 340? And that way, Mrs. X would still receive a good price, and you've got a cracking property there. To which I said to the agent, I said, you know what? I know, you're right. You're absolutely right. The figures don't work. Yeah. They just don't. The yield's just not strong enough. I've got to deal with the added complications, which I'm not scared of, but I have to be open to the added complications of communal maintenance on the property.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. I've got plenty of properties I've got to deal with that, but it is an extra complication. It's something out of my control. When the windows need replacing or work needs doing on the roof, I don't get to decide when I'm doing it. I just have to pay for it along with the other 6 people. I looked at the rental yield. It just wasn't strong enough. I looked at it and thought, could I buy it, keep it a couple of years, get rid of it? And I think that's not my strategy. My strategy is to go for medium long term. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do it because it's a lovely property, but the figures don't work. So I guess that's what I've learned, Vicky. If the figures work, it's a good investment. And if the figures don't work, it doesn't matter how lovely it is or the lovely area that it's in. The figures don't work, don't buy it. That's
Spreadsheet all the way. And I think that's really interesting that, that point at which you sort of like slapped the side of your face and went, no, but that's not my strategy. I want to keep them, not being tempted. We said, like, every time there's a challenge, there's the potential for opportunities.
Yeah.
But not getting caught by sort of shiny poppy. I'm mixing my metaphors. Shiny penny and butterflies, whatever,
Vicky, if I'd have bought that property and I'm talking about it now, and there's still a twinge in my chest. The head has to rule the heart.
Yeah.
It's an investment. That's what it is.
Yes.
Oh, it's lovely, and look at the leafy trees and everything. That's great, Jay. But the figures don't work. You're going to have to invest an awful lot of capital into that. When frankly, the same amount of capital could have bought you 3 decent little yielders in East Manchester or East Merseyside or wherever I happen to go.
So, that's also really interesting. 2 things there. One, head over heart. I'm always banging on spreadsheet. In fact, I don't even really want you to look at the property as a photo first. I want you to look at the spreadsheet
the
first.
Numbers. Yeah,
the numbers work. And then if the numbers work, let's look at the area. So now let's look at the map. And if the map still works, then you can have a look at the photo. Because actually what it looks like is an emotional trigger. I mean, I know the reason it took my sister so long and I, when we first started investing back in 2004, was because we couldn't agree. She always looked at the picture and wanted somewhere that looked nice and was nice. And I always wanted the spreadsheet because that's the bit that triggered me, and it's not how it looks. And then I think, this idea of, I've forgotten the second piece that you said that was so good. Hang on. You said the emotion, and then, that you could have bought this. All right, it was an emotional, lovely one. I could buy one big one or 3 little ones.
Yeah, I could buy a number of properties for the same capital outlay. Yeah.
Yes.
And then another example of where my heart nearly ruled my head. And bearing in mind, I'm a financial advisor. I've been in financial services since I was 18 years old. And it sounds like the beginning of a song, a really bad song. And it was a couple of years ago, great opportunity came up to buy a flat in Shrewsbury, depending on what part of the country you're in. And I love Shrewsbury. And myself and my wife, we often said, wouldn't it be great to have a little separate property just to go to now and again, and in Shrewsbury and Shropshire, lovely, gorgeous little 1-bed flat, small block of 15, all owner occupied. Client was getting rid of it. It was worth 150,000. Client was looking they would have took 120 off me because it had served them well. And I looked at it and I was going to buy it. And my plan was to rent it out for a period of time, and then at some point, maybe to use it as a little back and forth. So actually would have bought that one in my personal name rather than company for legal purposes, because of change of use in the future. But and it all looked fine initially. But then when I delved in and I got the accounts, which again were run by the leaseholders, the apartment owners, no problem there, went through it all, it became very clear that an awful lot of money was going to have to be spent to fix an issue with the underground car park underneath the communal garden. And I thought to myself, no, the figures just don't work. The figures just don't work, because that discount that client was supposedly giving me, that £30,000 discount, I could spend 30 grand on this as one of the leaseholders. So it's all about understanding what you're getting into, which is more complicated on leasehold apartments. Of course it is. Yes. But again, it all goes back to the same concept. If the figures don't stack up, don't do it.
No. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant place to stop this bit, because what I want to do is use this as a teaser and make people come back for part 2. So we are going to speak on another podcast about the whole controversial view that we were having a chat pre this about pensions and properties and everything else. So I'm going to leave everybody with a teaser, because
pensions are exciting. Don't have anybody tell you anything different.
No. I'm not denying they're exciting, but we're still going to be controversial. I won't deny that they're exciting. That's fine, because I know that is your life. So look, everybody, I hope that you will have found my conversation with Jay really interesting. I think some key things that have come out for me: head over heart. Absolutely. This is not an emotional thing. It's about the long term. There are always going to be people playing down the market, being nervous. I don't know if that's a British thing or whatever it is. We're always like that. But actually, if you recognize that this is an investment opportunity for you and you're in it for the long term, you will be able to ride over any of those challenges that come along if you're professional about it, if you pay attention to the numbers, and if you are prepared to maybe crystallize your view or adapt slightly. Jay and I have been doing it in excess of 20 years now, and we're fine. We've still got our shirts. He's got a lovely purple shirt.
I've got a few battle scars too, but I'm hanging in there.
I know. Well, we've all got battle scars. And I mean, crikey, there was a bit there in the middle of the podcast where we had a good old moan about the life of a landlord. And I don't think we really covered off all of our moans in that. But yeah, I really want to thank you for sharing it, not just as a fellow investor, but also as somebody with that financial background, because I think pulling out those bits about, thinking about your long-term strategy. Are you holding? How many do you want to buy? Do you want to hold them? Do you want to flip them? That will determine the vehicle that you buy in, whether it's your private name or a limited company. And then just being aware that now buying in these limited companies, it's more the norm. So it's not such a drama. Yes, of course, they're going to skin you for another 1% or something on the top because they can. But, it's just about, this is actually a business. It is an investment, but it is a business. And so like any business, you need your plan, you need to know what you're looking to achieve, and you need to be professional about it and pay attention to the numbers if you want to succeed. Would that round up what you said?
Yes, you rounded up much better than I would.
Well, look, we're going to carry on having a chat in a minute. But for now, Jay, I just want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Vicky. It was very nice to speak to you. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I love chatting to you. And to everybody else, thank you very much for listening. I hope that that's put some real whoosh into your property investment plans, that you recognize that this is something that you can be successful at as long as that is what you want to do. So set your mind and you will be successful. Now, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, because in a few more weeks, you'll hear part 2 of this, where Jay and I are going to be talking about his controversial views. I don't think they're so controversial, but they probably are. Controversial views about pensions and property investment. And it's worth listening to. I think you're really going to, as you have in this one, gain some valuable insights. So last, thank you again, Jay. Thank you so much. And we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
My mission is to help people like you understand what a wealthy life truly entails. Together, we'll identify your ideal lifestyle, leverage your resources to generate the necessary income through property investment, whether by teaching you how or by managing the process on your behalf. Let's inject some momentum into your wealthy life plans as you subscribe now to capture every episode of the podcast, and then get in touch via my website, book a call. All of the details are in the show notes.